Gregg Popovich is a mentor of mine, but I think a leader for all of us. Every coach in the league has watched Pop over the years, watched him handle his players, watched him deal with the media, watched him take on social issues, social justice initiatives. He's just an inspiration for all of us. And I know for me personally, he's one of the most impactful people I've ever had in my life. So Pop is amazing.
He has always stood up for what's right about the game and what's right for coaches. Sometimes those things don't match what's good for him even. But he will still do it because he believes in what's right for the game of basketball and for the NBA. And that's one of the things I've always admired about him. He's won more games than about anybody, or has won more games than anyone, has a ton of titles. But I think what he means to coaches, especially even more than just the game, is just his commitment to coaches and bettering that part of the job.
To me, he's the greatest coach in the history of the game because his teams evolved through the years of the NBA where the coaching and the technology and everything was getting better and better and better. The other part of Pop's legacy for me is that he is quietly and in an unadvertised way really helped a lot of guys in the coaching profession. In 2000, I was an assistant with the Pacers. I was up for the job, but didn't get it. Isaiah Thomas got the job. And Pop reached out to me and he said, hey, why don't you come down to San Antonio for a few days, watch training camp, give me your thoughts, travel with us a little bit. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And so I went down, spent time, and it was a big confidence boost for me because I was an assistant coach that was getting into the conversation for head coaching jobs. But that made me believe that I could do it. And he was always a very big supporter. You know, he's obviously one of the all-time greats, and for me, he's the greatest coach in NBA history.
Developing a culture that's second to none in the NBA. That's what Pop has set that example, and he's a trendsetter. Everything that I've tried to do and emulate is whatever kind of what, look at what San Antonio's doing, because it's probably going to be the next best trend in the NBA, and we're all copycats.
Pop has been just an incredible role model, for all of us. Our organization, we feel that it has been an incredible blessing to be able to compete against the San Antonio Spurs twice in the finals, and I think it was fitting. We were able to win one, and they were able to win one, so we were both able to share in all the different emotions of elation and despair. His superpower that has really stood out to me is he has a way of making everybody feel like they matter. And that was true in those 2 weeks of my experience with USA basketball. And that's everybody. That's the players, that's the staff, it's when you go out to dinner. He makes everybody in the restaurant feel like they matter, and that's a beautiful gift. That's something that I will always take with me. And I think he's had that kind of impact on the entire Coaches Association.
He's meant the world to myself and my family. This is public knowledge. I said it before. I've told the story before, but I was going through a tough time. I was going through a divorce, and my ex was living in Denver, Colorado, and I was in San Antonio. And I'll never forget, my sister used to fly and pick them up and bring them to San Antonio, and they were out for about a week because we had a nice long homestand. My boys were 3 and 5 at the time, and I took them to the airport at the time we were about to fly out. We had a 3-game East Coast trip starting in Chicago. I actually had that first game was mine to scout. And when I took my boys to the airport and walked them to their gate, this is back in the day when you could still go to the gates. I walk them, they start crying. And lo and behold, I start crying. So I had to call Pop. I said, Pop, just give me a few minutes. I'm at the gate with my boys. I'm about to put them on this flight. They're crying, I'm crying. And he used to call me Mikey. I can't even believe I'm putting that out there. He goes, Mikey? if you show up to this playing, you won't have a job. I said, Pop, what are you talking about? I said, this is my scout, this first game on the East Coast. He said, no. Don't come to the plane. Stay with your boys. We'll see you when we get back. I said, Pop, click. He hangs up on me. And so now I'm in a dilemma. I'm like, should I go to the plane? Long story short, I stayed the extra 4 or 5 days. It was great for myself, my boys. And, that little story right there is just a touch of how he impacts not only everybody else's life out there, but how he impacts people's lives personally. I can go on and on about what he's done on the court, but his off the court stuff and his personal touch that he has with everybody is way more impactful than anything he's done for the game of basketball on the floor.
Everyone knows about Coach Pop. And I think the biggest thing that you're going to know and learn about him when you first start digging in and learn about his stories and his backgrounds is the people that he's really touched and made a difference in their lives. I got to see that firsthand, having been in San Antonio for a number of years. You just hear about the impact that he's made. His care for people is the best that I've ever seen. To be able to just kind of take away the coaching label and say, I'm just a person here to help you get better as a player, as a person, as a coach, as an executive, whatever it is. The way that he pours himself love and care and passion into others is second to none. Understanding how important it is to be good to people, to help people grow in so many different ways. He's unbelievable.
And he has really been that voice of reason for the entire NBA, not just the Coaches Association, but the league. And when Coach Pop stands up and speaks in the meeting, everyone is listening to what he has to say, and he doesn't just come in and speak if it's something that that's really bothering him, like the time that I think both he and Coach Sloan was bothered by players not tucking in their jerseys.
Pop is, the coach's coach. He's a guy who you can visibly see hold the greatest of players, accountable for all of their actions. And again, he's shown the ability to develop young players into great veteran players, and then he showed the ability to coach great veteran players. My story goes back a long time. I was a camper at one of his camps in Aspen, Colorado when I was 13 or 14 years old. He obviously has a relationship with my family, but he treated me, with great respect. And he took care of me and looked out for me even when I was a camper at his camp. And then that relationship has always continued. So he's one of the guys that I've looked up to.
If you ever sat in one of our coaches' meetings, is, the way he treats all of us, tries to help everybody. When he speaks, everybody listens. He's been the ultimate role model, I think, for all of us. In Orlando, going through a rebuild, where we traded all of our guys at the trade deadline, and we're playing with younger guys, had some injuries, and it was difficult for them, difficult for the coaches. We played San Antonio with maybe 10, 12 games left in the season in Orlando. And we were regularly down 18-20 at half, at that point. Not through lack of effort or anything like that. When the game ended, he grabbed me and he said, listen, this is going to be difficult for you guys. It's not going to be easy to win many games. Teach your way through it and have your staff teach their way through it. It gives you something to hold on to. And it changed our whole season in terms of we still didn't win many games, but it was prophetic. It was, instead of how are we going to get through the day, we're going to teach our way through this. And I thought it brought a new life to our staff when I shared it with them, a positivity to our group. And that, I think, would be, if you talk to all the coaches, I'm sure everybody's got some type of story like that because he's always been there to help all of us.
He's just a legend of coaching. He's a legend in our game. He's meant so much, not only to our league because of his longevity and success, championship coach many times over, but the consistency of which he's behaved the way he's had his teams represent him, his culture, and his ball club on the floor. You definitely know what it is when you see it. For me, I think Pop, the person, has meant a lot to our league, our game, our community, our fans. Standing up for what he believes in, having the backbone to go out there and speak his mind on certain issues with such humility and humanity. I think that's a legacy that is on top of all the basketball success and even more important.
To do what he's done for such a long period of time, to me, that's the true mark of greatness. He's done it year after year, and he's been great to the coaches. He's been great for the game. He speaks his mind. He's true to himself. I just can't think of the NBA without him.
Coach Pop is an incredibly special and important coach. Not just to me. I think, almost 20 years of working with Coach Pop and that day-to-day, involvement, and for me, growth and learning is incredibly important. But I think what he's done for the league and what he's done for so many other people, it's just, I think he set a standard for how you help people grow and move on and hopefully be the best versions of themselves. And, I think added a level of integrity and professionalism to coaches, but also an ability to kind of care and have compassion for each other and respect for each other and respect for the game. He has a lot of great characteristics that he's instilled in people that have been around him, but I think the league has kind of soaked him in and absorbed him over time, and incredibly special, incredibly important to our league.
I don't think words really describe what Pop has meant to the coaching profession. I think there's so many people talk about legacies and coaching trees, and I don't think you can go to a staff in the NBA that does not have someone that has been touched or influenced by what Coach Popovich has done. But those guys constantly talk about his lifestyle and the way in which he impacted the way they lived. And I think that's so important to what he's meant for our teams, our game, and every coach that has ever come into contact with him.
The biggest thing I really take away from Pop is he's a human, and he loves and cares about people. And if you ever have a chance to work for him, it's about keeping in contact, that relationship that's built to be able to not just worry about like wins and losses, but he really truly cares about you as a person.
He doesn't just have success for himself. He also wants to see the young guys that he's mentored and young guys come into the league. He wants to see us do well as well. And so when you have guys like that, it makes it great for the game. And so whenever I get a chance to talk to Pop, I always want to pick his brain. And he's always up front. He's always honest, and he's helped me out a lot.
You can look at him as a trailblazer for years. And I'm going back a bit. They've had a tremendous impact on the game, the way it's played. They seem to have been ahead of the curve. The way he managed, I think, is the most important takeaway from me as a young coach. Managing people, manage the day-to-day, looking at it from a holistic perspective. It's bigger than just what can those players do for me between the lines. He valued them as people, their families, all the other employees in the building. They felt valued in what they were doing. They felt invested in whatever they were doing as part of the group. Very gracious, very humble, for a guy who, the list of accomplishments go on and on. And he's just very open.
I think that people can see the success and what he's built in San Antonio with the championships. But, I remember being a college coach and, wanting to come into training camp and, reached out to him, called me back, invited me in. I was in for about 2.5 days. He took me to dinner. I think sometimes people don't get a chance to see Pop for who he is as a person. He's a great guy, incredibly humble, I think very, very giving to coaches, always has time to talk. I think in any sports, whether it be college athletics, professional sports, he'll go down as one of the greatest coaches of all time.
Yeah, he's obviously going to go down as one of the very best to ever do it. I think he's the best of the generation that I played in. I just think that he done just a wonderful job of advancing with the game. He didn't, stay with one way of playing, for instance. So he just changed with the league. And not only did he change, he was able to
win that way. And he continued to make modifications and changes when the league did so, and was able to still be just as effective. He coached his best players very hard.
He traded for me back in 1997, I think, and he's been a mentor as a player and now as a coach, and he's been like a father to me for years. I didn't understand what he meant to coaches until I heard all of the stories about the phone calls that he would take, not just from NBA coaches, but from Division III coaches, high school coaches, and many others. Everybody talks about the Spurs tree, but it really is a family. And all of us try our best to pick his brain because he's one of the more wise, caring, thoughtful people that I've met in my life.
I know a lot of coaches like myself certainly look up to him, less about what he's done on the floor, but more about how he's carried himself overall as a leader and a leader of his organization, leader of his team, and a leader for the NBA. You know, I know it's still a pain to play his team no matter who he has on it, so they're always going to play hard and they're always going to represent Gregg Popovich's style of basketball.
Coach Popovich means a ton to the coaches, but players, to the community, to fans. Won a ton of games, we all know that, but the thing that sticks out to me is who he is as a person. It speaks volumes when you look at his career, how he's been able to adjust with the game, you know, going from David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Avery Johnson, and then to more Tim Duncan, Mano, and Tony, and then Kawhi is kind of added into the mix. And so I've watched him more than anybody else adjust to his game, and a lot of it is because he's a person that puts people first.
It's one of those things when it comes to Pop, man, it's just like greatness and simplicity. The simple greatness of him, man, it's just, you know, he's not going to wow you with a whole bunch of fancy words and try to, you know, prove how smarter than you he is. He's just straight to the point. I appreciate his contributions to the game. I appreciate what the tree he's developed, the phenomenal coaches, the phenomenal players, the phenomenal front office people. He and RC both have had the pleasure of presenting to the NBA as a whole, and guys going to get other head coaching jobs, general manager jobs, and kudos to Pop, man. I appreciate everything he's done. I received some secondhand blessings from that guy, so love him to death.
You know, his accomplishments speak for themselves. To have not just the win total, but the longevity in one place, I think is something we all aspire to as coaches, to be able to have a program that you get to look after for that long is really, really incredible. Like, you just don't see that where people are in one place for their whole career. For me personally, he's been everything. He's been a mentor. He's been a friend. He's been, you know, to go from an intern working for him to then sitting on the bench with him and arguing with him in timeouts was a pretty surreal experience. But to have spent 11 years in San Antonio and get that foundation there from him, you know, from the rest of the assistant coaches I worked with, all the players, you know, that I got to coach there and be around, it's really special.
His tactical knowledge is, you know, second to none, but his ability to connect with the best player as well as, you know, the guy who's coming in off the bench who's super, super important, like a Ginobili, and then the guy who is towards the end of the bench who's probably going to be a head coach one day. He touches all of those people in such a special way. And, you know, he's won championships and had great teams, but that's not just his legacy, it's the way he connects.
What I learned about him is a lot more than just basketball and on the court. It was the, you know, value of relationship and the people skills he had. You know, I say he has pretty much every box checked, you know, from
accountability, disciplinarian, X's and O's, great people person. So he's the most well-rounded coach I've been around. But those dinners that we had for years and the time and camaraderie that we spent together, those things kind of formulate who you are, as a person and a coach. And so everybody looks at the championships, but he's an even better person for sure. The stretch of excellence, 50-win seasons, all-time winningest coach, those things aren't a surprise when you get to know him, and he doesn't skip any steps. He starts every year like these guys are in middle school with all the fundamentals and basics, and wants to teach guys from the ground up. And so it's not surprising to see the success for sure. What he's built there in San Antonio will have a lasting impression on this league forever.